Welcome back to Horror Cow Stories. Tonight we have 11 accounts from people who went into the American backcountry and came back with something they can't explain. These are not exaggerations. These are not stories told around a fire for effect. These are the things people carried alone for years before they were willing to say them out loud. If you're new here, subscribe now so you don't miss what's coming. Turn the lights down.
Story 1. I moved 6 miles deeper into the trail, camped off the path, no fire, no light, and at 1 a.m. I heard the same two voices, same rhythm, same distance, like they'd been tracking me the whole time. My name is Nathan Pruitt. I'm 42 years old. I work as a supply chain analyst out of Asheville, North Carolina. I manage inventory flow. I argue with vendors on the phone. I sit in front of dual monitors for 10 hours a day and drink mediocre coffee out of a mug my son made me when he was 8. I don't hike competitively. I just grew up near the mountains, and going out into them a few times a year feels like maintenance. Like something I need to do to keep the ratio right between screen time and actual sky. I know the terrain, I know how to read weather, I know how to read my own limits. I've been doing solo overnights since I was 20, and nothing, not a single thing in all those years ever made me feel the way what happened on the Big Creek Trail made me feel. It was a Thursday in late October. I'd taken Friday off work, so I had a long weekend lined up. I parked at the trailhead around noon, signed the register, shouldered my pack, and started in. My plan was to go out about 10 miles, camp near the creek bend I'd used 4 times before, and come back out Sunday morning. I knew this stretch well, same season even. There was nothing exploratory about this trip. It was comfortable and familiar, and that was the whole point. The first day went fine. I passed 2 people heading out just after the first ridge, then had the trail completely to myself. By the time I reached my campsite, the light was getting long and orange, and the air had that clean, cold snap that only comes in the mountains in October. I made camp efficiently, ate well, read for a while by headlamp, slept harder than I had in months. I woke up just before 5 o'clock a.m., not to a sound, not to any identifiable stimulus, just that sudden, complete awareness. Like someone flipped a switch. I was fully awake and alert before my eyes were even open. I lay still in my sleeping bag and listened. The creek was doing its thing 30 yards away. Wind moved slowly through the canopy. Normal. The normal sounds of a normal October night in the Carolina mountains. I closed my eyes. Then I heard the talking. Not loud, not close, but distinct enough that I could tell it was 2 voices, low, unhurried, like 2 people having a quiet conversation about something routine. Nothing urgent, nothing distressed. I could not make out words. It was just the rhythm of it. One voice, then the other, back and forth, the cadence of ordinary conversation. I checked my watch, 4:53 a.m. I sat up slowly, unzipped the tent fly carefully, and looked out. The site was dark. My fire had been out for hours. I clicked on my headlamp and swept it around the clearing. Nothing. I sat listening. The talking continued. Same volume, same distance. Somewhere to the east, which was deeper into the trail, not the way I'd come in. It stopped around 5:15, not gradually, not fading out, just stopped. And then it was only the creek and the wind. I'm a rational person. I talk myself through it. 2 hikers camped further up the drainage, sound carrying strangely through the hollow. I've heard sounds do peculiar things in mountain terrain, bouncing off ridges, channeled by water, making something far away seem close and something close seem far. I filed it under odd and tried to go back to sleep. I didn't, but I told myself I would. And eventually daylight started coming, and I got up. I broke camp at first light and started walking. About 2 miles in, I crossed a side drainage where the trail dipped low and the ground was soft and black with retained moisture. There in the mud, fresh, were boot prints, 2 sets, different tread patterns, one a standard lug sole, one a more aggressive trail runner pattern. Walking parallel, heading the same direction I was heading. I crouched and studied the edges of the impressions. The mud hadn't filled or settled. These were from that morning, within the last hour or 2. I stood up and kept going. 2 hikers, early starts, nothing unusual. I hadn't passed a side trail where they could have come in, but maybe they'd night hiked in and I'd missed their prints in the dark. I filed it under explainable and kept walking. I never caught up to them. By midday, I'd covered 6 miles of trail without seeing a single person. The boot prints had disappeared on rockier ground about a mile past the drainage. No side trails, no camping spots they could have ducked into. They had simply been there. And then the ground changed and they were no longer there. I stopped for lunch on a flat boulder overlooking a long hollow. Sat there eating slowly, watching the trail below where it curved back into view. Nothing moved, no color, no sound of footsteps on leaves, nothing. That afternoon I passed the lean-to shelter at mile marker 15. I wasn't planning to stop, but something made me slow down as I approached. There was a jacket hanging on one of the support beams, not thrown carelessly over something, hung deliberately, precisely over a nail that had been driven into the wood for exactly that purpose. The collar settled around the nail head, the arms hanging straight, the fabric smoothed flat. A dark brown canvas jacket, heavy enough for the shoulder season. No pack beneath it, no food scraps, no gear, no boot prints in the soft soil at the base of the shelter platform. Just the jacket, hanging there as if someone had stepped out of it and expected to come back. I reached up and felt the front pockets, empty. I checked the side pockets, empty. I turned the collar back and looked at the label area. The back of the collar had been cut away, not torn, cut clean with something sharp. A 2-inch section of the collar seam removed, the kind of cut you'd make if you were removing a label with a name on it. The fabric around the cut was slightly stiff at the edges. I hung it back the way I found it and kept walking. I told myself there were explanations. I kept telling myself that for the rest of the afternoon. That night, I chose a campsite well off trail behind a dense screen of rhododendron that would have made me invisible to anyone passing. I made camp without a fire, ate cold food, kept my headlamp off after the initial setup, and sat in the dark for a long time, just listening to the forest settle. The woods were quiet in the particular way they get when something has moved through and everything is waiting to see if it comes back. Around 1 a.m. I heard the voices again, same quality, same two-voice rhythm, one then the other, nothing I could make into words, but clearly speech. And I want to be precise about this part because this is what I've thought about the most since. Same distance, not the same general direction, the same distance, as if whatever or whoever was out there was tracking my position and deliberately maintaining a consistent gap between us. I had moved 6 miles from where I'd heard them before. I had camped in a concealed location, off-trail, with no fire and no light. And they were still there, still at what felt like roughly the same remove, maybe 150, 200 yards. I did not sleep. I sat with my knife open across my knee and watched the darkness outside the mesh of my tent until the sky began to change. When it was light enough to move safely, I left without cooking breakfast and covered the remaining miles at a pace I would not call hiking. At the trailhead, I signed out in the register and sat in my truck for 20 minutes with the engine running before I felt settled enough to drive. I went back the following spring with a friend named Marcus who does a lot of backcountry miles. I trust his judgment. We walked the same stretch together. Nice weather, busy weekend, other hikers regularly on trail. We talked the whole way. Nothing felt wrong. The forest felt normal the way forests do when they're full of the right kind of human noise. When we passed the lean-to shelter, I looked at the support beam where the jacket had been hanging. There was no nail, no mark in the wood where a nail had been driven and pulled, no discoloration in the grain, no scar in the bark, no indication that anything had ever been fastened to that beam at all. The wood was continuous, unmarked, old. I stood looking at it for a moment. Marcus asked if I'd been to the shelter before. I said yes, once. He nodded and kept walking. And I followed him out. I don't know if the nail was never there and I invented it in the fear of that night, or if the nail was there, and then it wasn't, and the beam healed over it in 6 months, the way nothing made of wood could possibly do. I've been a supply chain analyst for 18 years. My job is facts and accountability and the paper trail of things that happen. I have no paper trail for this. I have a memory of a jacket, a cut collar, a night of voices that kept their measured distance, and a spring morning looking at a beam with nothing on it. I still hike that trail. But I always sign in and out at the register, and I always tell someone where I'm going, because I think whatever was out there wanted me to know it was there, and I think it let me leave, but I don't think it's done. Story 2. By the time I packed out early, I documented 11 trees, all marked identically, all stripped in the exact same pattern, forming a perfectly straight line through the forest, 30 feet south of the trail I was walking. And I still don't know what made them. I want to be upfront about who I am before I tell you what happened. Because I think context matters when you're asking someone to believe something unusual. My name is Marcus Holloway. I'm a civil engineer. I'm trained to assess real-world conditions, identify failure points, quantify risk, and make decisions based on what can be observed and measured. My entire professional life is an exercise in not seeing things that aren't there, which is why what happened to me in the Daniel Boone National Forest in eastern Kentucky has sat in my chest like a splinter for going on 5 years now, because I cannot find the cause, and a cause is supposed to be there. I was 36 when it happened. I was on a solo hiking and photography trip through the Red River Gorge area, extending out into the backcountry beyond the recreational zones. 6 days, 5 nights. I know the area reasonably well. I'd done shorter trips there before. I know the terrain, the way the sandstone formations catch the light, the specific quality of silence in those woods that's different from anywhere else I've been. Day 2 is when I first noticed the tree. I want to describe it carefully because the tree is important to understanding what followed. It was a large maple, old growth, substantial trunk, standing about 30 feet off the south side of the trail. What caught my eye was the coloring. The bark on the north face of the trunk had been stripped in a clean vertical strip about 10 inches wide, running from roughly waist height up to where the first major branch divided, maybe 15 feet above the ground. The exposed wood underneath was pale, almost white, and had clearly been exposed long enough to begin weathering at the edges. Not a fresh wound, something that had happened in a prior season and was gradually healing over. Deer rub, I thought, possibly black bear. I'm not a naturalist, but I know both leave marks on trees. I photographed it out of mild curiosity and continued on. 4 miles further along the trail, I came across a second tree with an identical strip. Same width, same placement on the north face, same height range. I stopped and pulled up the photograph on my camera screen and held it next to the tree I was looking at. The dimensions were a precise match. Not similar, matching. I'm an engineer. I understand measurement and proportion, and what I was looking at was the same mark reproduced exactly on a different tree 4 miles away. A third tree appeared 2 miles after that. Same mark. Fourth, another 1.5 miles. I started moving slower, watching the south side of the trail, looking ahead instead of at my feet. By the time I made camp that night, I had documented 5 of them in my field notes with GPS coordinates. I sat by my small fire and drew a rough line connecting the coordinates on my map. The marked trees were not random. They formed a line that ran parallel to the trail, consistently about 30 feet to the south, and that line was perfectly straight within the margin of natural variation. Whatever had made these marks was moving on a fixed bearing, pausing at specific trees, making the same mark and continuing. I woke around 3:00 a.m. that night to the sensation of presence outside the tent. Not a sound I could name, not an identifiable noise, just that specific awareness that the air near you is occupied. I lay still, breathed slowly, counted to 60, and then the sensation was gone, and the forest resumed its normal ambient sounds, as if whatever had been there had concluded its business and moved on. In the morning, I found a single orange ribbon tied to a branch about 4 feet from my tent door. Not new, but not ancient either, weathered to a pale yellow on one side where the sun had hit it, tied in a specific knot that I recognized immediately, because it's a standard hitch used in survey flagging. A knot I use in my own professional work, half hitch doubled, snug tight, tag end tucked. Someone who worked in a field that uses survey tape had tied this, and they had tied it 4 feet from where I slept. Over the next 2 days, I documented 6 more marked trees, bringing the total to 11. And on the second to last night, sitting outside my tent in the dark, I heard the knocking. 3 slow, evenly spaced knocks on wood. A pause of perhaps 10 seconds. 3 more. Another pause. 3 more. Rhythmic, patient, coming from roughly the direction of the tree line where the marked strip ran. Not a woodpecker whose rhythm is rapid and irregular. Not any sound I could attribute to wind or settling wood. 3 deliberate knocks, precisely timed, repeated over and over for approximately 20 minutes until it stopped, as suddenly as it had started. I have tried for 5 years to find a cause for those trees. I've consulted a forestry biologist who was interested, but ultimately without an answer. I've described the knocking to 2 different people who study forest acoustics and received thoughtful non-explanations. What I haven't been able to do is stop hearing it when I'm trying to fall asleep in a quiet room. I did not return to finish my photography trip. I packed out on day 5. I have never told anyone the full version of this story before now. But there's one more thing. Something I didn't include in my field notes. Something I've tried to rationalize for half a decade. On the final morning, before I packed out, I went back to the first marked tree. The one I'd photographed on day 2. I wanted to see it again, to confirm I hadn't misremembered the details. When I got there, I found something new. Carved into the exposed wood, fresh with wood shavings still clinging to the cuts, was a series of tally marks. 11 of them, one for each tree I documented. I hadn't carved them. No one else had been on that trail, but someone, or something, had been counting. I took one photograph, then I left. I didn't run, but I didn't stop either. When I got home, I uploaded all my photos to my computer. Every image was there, except one. The photograph of the tally marks was gone. Not corrupted, not failed to save, just missing from the sequence. Frame 47 was the first marked tree on day 2. Frame 49 was a landscape shot from later that morning. Frame 48, the one I took of the tally marks, didn't exist. I checked the camera's internal log. According to the metadata, I took 46 photos on that trip. But I know I took 47. I still have the GPS coordinates. I've thought about going back, bringing someone with me, documenting it properly, getting answers. But every time I look at the map, I think about the ribbon tied 4 feet from my tent, about the knocking that lasted 20 minutes, about the tally marks that counted exactly how many trees I'd found. And I realize, whatever was out there didn't just mark those trees. It was marking territory. It was tracking me. And it knew, before I did, exactly how many I would find. Because it wanted me to know, it wanted me to see the pattern, to understand that I was being watched, to understand that I was being measured. I'm a civil engineer. I assess risk for a living, and the risk assessment here is simple. Whatever made those marks is still out there, still following that line, still counting, and I think it's waiting to see if I come back. Story 3. I'm an ultra runner. I know how long it takes to cover terrain. The man I saw standing at the base of that ridge was 5 minutes behind me, but the trail between us was completely exposed, and I never saw him climb it. People who know me know I don't rattle easy. I spent 7 years in the Army, 2 deployments to places I don't discuss at dinner parties, and I've worked search and rescue as a volunteer in the Smoky Mountains for going on 12 years. I've carried bodies out of the woods. I've spent nights in conditions that would break most people. Not because I'm extraordinary, but because I got comfortable with discomfort early and never lost that. I say this not to impress anyone, but to give you a baseline. When I tell you something scared me, I need you to understand what that means, coming from me. My name is Cole Brennan, I'm 39, and I live in Knoxville. What happened to me happened on a section of the Benton-McKay Trail in North Georgia about 5 years ago now. And I've told pieces of it to maybe 4 people in that time, which is unusual for me. I'm not a keeper of secrets, but this one has been hard to say out loud without feeling like I'm handing it to someone to dismiss. I was doing a solo training run, not a hike. A run. I do trail ultras, and I use long solo runs in remote terrain as both physical and mental conditioning. I was running a 35-mile section, planning to be out and back before dark, full pack with emergency gear because I've been doing this long enough to know what happens to people who don't take that seriously. I knew this particular route well. I'd run pieces of it before. Around mile 20, I stopped at a stream crossing to filter water and refill my bottles. And as I straightened up from the bank, I noticed someone watching me from across the water. He was standing in a gap between 2 large hemlocks, absolutely still, maybe 40 feet from where I was crouched. Older man, I thought, probably mid-60s, gray stubble, broad through the shoulders, wearing a dark green jacket that looked too heavy for the weather. He had nothing. No pack, no water source of his own that I could see. No visible reason to be standing motionless in the woods watching a stranger filter water at a stream crossing. I called out, nothing. I raised a hand, no response. I finished filtering, capped my bottles, stood up to full height, and when I looked back across the stream, he was gone. I'd been looking at the ground for maybe 30 seconds. I ran on. 20 miles in, 15 miles of technical trail left, plenty of daylight. I wasn't going to slow down over a strange moment at a stream. Mile 24, I hit a long switchback section that climbed an exposed ridge, no tree cover for maybe half a mile. The trail clearly visible in both directions. I was about halfway up the switchback when I felt it, the physical sense of someone directly behind me, not imagined, not suggested by anxiety. My body reacted before my conscious mind did, hair on my arms standing up, a shift in my breathing. I turned around. The trail was empty as far back as I could see, which, on that ridge, was a long way. I turned and ran on. At the top of the ridge, I looked back again, down the full length of the switchback below me. He was at the bottom, same man, same jacket, same posture. Standing at the base of the switchback where I'd been perhaps 6 minutes earlier, he was not running, he was not breathing hard. He was standing the way he had been standing at the stream, completely still, and he was looking up at me. The distance between where he stood and where I was standing at the top of that ridge was not something a man of his age and build could cover on foot in 6 minutes. Not at a walk, not at a run, not without me hearing him, not without me seeing him on the completely exposed trail below me as I climbed. He raised one hand, not a wave, palm out, held steady, like something between a greeting and a signal. I turned and ran the final 11 miles at a pace I have never matched before or since. I hit the trailhead, got to my truck, sat on the hood, and stared at the tree line for a while before I could make myself drive. 3 weeks later, I brought it up with another local trail runner, a guy named Travis Reed, who logs serious miles in the same terrain. I didn't frame it as my experience. I just asked if he'd ever encountered anything unusual on that stretch. He put down his coffee and looked at me. He described a man he'd seen twice. Different days, different conditions, always still, always watching, no gear. He'd asked around among the local trail community, and 3 other runners had similar accounts. Nobody had seen the man arrive or leave from a trailhead. Nobody had seen him move. Nobody had found an explanation. I've been back on that trail section 3 times since then, twice with a group, once solo. On the solo run, around mile 22, I had that feeling again, the physical sense of something behind me, the static on the back of the neck, the change in breath. I turned around, empty trail. I turned back and kept running. When I crested the next ridgeline, I looked back down the switchback below me. Nothing, just trail and trees and afternoon light, but I noticed I'd picked up my pace by about 90 seconds per mile without being aware of doing it. My body knew something before my mind did, and it wasn't going to argue about it. I don't know what the man was. I don't know how he moved the way he moved or appeared the way he appeared. I know that Travis Reed and the others are real people with reliable accounts. I know that between us, we have seen or experienced the same thing in the same location across different years and conditions. I know that in search and rescue, when you get consistent independent reports of the same thing in the same area, you don't dismiss them. You start looking. I'm still looking. But there's something I haven't told anyone yet. Not Travis, not the other runners, not even the SAR team. About 6 months ago, I went back to that trail section, not to run, just to walk it, slowly, paying attention. I brought a GPS unit and marked waypoints at every spot where someone had reported seeing the man. When I got home and plotted them on a map, I realized something. The sightings formed a pattern, not random, a line. And that line ran parallel to the trail for exactly 8 miles, from the stream crossing at mile 20 to the ridge at mile 28. I checked the dates of the sightings. They spanned 4 years. But they all occurred within a 2-week window in late September, every single one. I looked at the calendar. It's late September now, and yesterday I got a message from a runner I don't know, someone who'd heard I was asking questions. The message said, "I saw him again yesterday, mile 22, same jacket, same stillness, but this time, when I turned around he was closer, maybe 30 feet. I didn't see him move, but he was closer." I checked my SAR logs. 2 weeks ago, a solo hiker went missing on that section of trail. Last known location, mile 24. They found his pack 3 days later, neatly placed on a flat rock just off the trail. Everything inside was untouched, his phone, his water, his food. But his boots were missing, and carved into the rock beneath the pack, fresh, with stone dust still clinging to the cuts, was a single word: close. I don't know what it means. I don't know if it's a warning or an invitation. But I know one thing: whatever is out there isn't just watching anymore. It's measuring distance, and it's getting closer. Story 4. I need to tell you something that happened to me 11 months ago. And I need you to understand up front that I am not someone who tells stories like this. My name is Marcus Holt. I'm 41 years old, and I'm a wildland paramedic. That means when things go wrong in remote terrain, a fall, a cardiac event, a search that turns into a recovery, I'm one of the people who hikes in to make it right. I've pulled bodies out of ravines. I've done CPR on a granite ledge at 9,000 feet with a storm coming in. I say this not to impress you, but so you understand what kind of person is about to tell you they can't explain something. The job burns you out in a specific way. It's not the blood, it's the accumulation. 12 years of being the calm one in other people's worst moments. So every autumn, I disappear. No trail apps, no check-in schedule beyond a rough window, just me, a loaded pack, and whatever direction feels right that morning. I've done this solo trip every year for 9 years running. Wyoming wilderness, the Uintas, once a stretch of the Adirondacks that tested me in ways I still think about. I know how to move through backcountry. I know what normal silence sounds like, and I know the specific way silence changes when something has disturbed it. This particular trip was the Bob Marshall Wilderness in Montana. Early October, 5 nights planned, a loose loop through lodgepole forest and open meadow along a drainage most people never bother with because it's a long approach for not much view. By day 2, I'd found my rhythm. That's the real reason I go. There's a version of my nervous system that only shows up after about 36 hours alone, and it's the closest thing I have to actual rest. I felt clear, present, good, in a way that has nothing to do with home. On the afternoon of day 2, I came across a hunting camp that had been abandoned mid-setup, a canvas wall tent half raised, one side pegged and taut, the other collapsed on the ground like whoever was working it had simply stopped mid-motion. A camp stove sat on a folding table, propane line connected, ready to light. Next to it, a cast iron pan with grease already congealed in it, like something had been cooked and then just left, uneaten. No plate anywhere nearby. A rifle case, unzipped and empty, lying across a cot. I called out. Nothing. I circled the site in an expanding loop, the way I've been trained to search for a person who might be down and unresponsive nearby. No blood, no drag marks, no boot prints leaving the site in any direction I could find, which struck me as genuinely strange because the ground there was soft glacial silt. It holds a print for days. Whoever had built that camp had gotten partway through it, and then, as far as the ground could tell me, never walked away from it at all. I logged the coordinates, told myself it was a hunter who'd been picked up early by a buddy on an ATV from some access point I hadn't found, and kept moving. I want to be honest that I didn't fully believe that explanation even as I made it. That night is the part I've only ever described to 2 people, a sleep specialist who diagnosed me with a parasomnia and moved on, and my sister who didn't know what to do with it, and I don't blame her. I woke up standing outside my tent, not groggy, not mid-motion, just instantly, fully awake, upright, about 20 feet from the tent door, facing a stand of dark timber. My boots were on but unlaced, the way you'd shove your feet into them without thinking. I had no memory of unzipping the tent, no memory of standing up, walking, or deciding to go anywhere. There was no transition. One moment didn't exist, and then this one did. I stood there taking inventory the way I do at a scene. Hands, breathing, surroundings, and everything came back clean except the missing time. I hadn't brought my headlamp. I hadn't brought the folding knife I keep clipped to my belt loop every single night, without exception, sleeping or not. The trees in front of me were black and completely still, and I remember thinking that the stillness felt less like an absence of sound and more like something holding its breath. I didn't feel drawn toward anything. There was no sound, no light, no smell that would explain why I'd walked out there. I just turned around, went back inside, and didn't sleep again that night. In the morning, the silt outside my tent told a story in 3 parts. My own prints going out, my own prints coming back, and between them, off to the side, angled toward the timber, a second set that weren't mine. Bare feet, large, wider than any boot print I'd have made, and pressed hard at the front of the foot with almost nothing at the heel. The kind of weight distribution you get from someone moving fast, not walking. They ran roughly 10 feet from a point just behind where I'd been standing, toward the tree line, and then stopped where the silt gave way to pine duff and root systems that hold nothing. There was no second set coming back out of the trees. I've spent 11 months turning this over with the kind of clinical distance my job trained into me. I don't believe in anything supernatural as an actual category of explanation. I want to say that clearly because I know how this sounds. I believe there is a real physical explanation for what happened at that campsite and for what happened to me that night, and I simply do not have enough information to reach it. That gap hasn't closed. If anything, it's gotten more specific with time, because the less I've been able to explain it, the more precisely I remember every detail of the print pattern in that silt. I told the sleep specialist about the parasomnia. I did not tell her about the footprints. I still don't know what kind of professional you're supposed to bring that information to, and some nights I think that not knowing is its own kind of answer. What I do now is run a loop of paracord through my tent zipper pull and knot it around my wrist before I sleep. I know it wouldn't stop anything that actually wanted in. I do it anyway. It's not protection, it's just something to hold on to in the dark, in case I wake up standing somewhere I don't remember walking to, and this time there's something in the trees waiting to see if I come out again. Story 5. I need you to understand one thing. I was not alone that night. My son was 12 years old and he saw it too. He's 23 now. He still won't sleep with the window uncovered. I'm not telling you this so you'll believe me. I'm telling you this because a story with 2 witnesses is a different kind of story than a story with 1. And what happened to us in the mountains of North Carolina 9 years ago is something my son and I have never fully agreed to stop talking about, because neither of us can explain it, and neither of us has ever managed to forget it. My name is Walter Griggs. I'm 61 now. I was 52 the summer this happened. My son Nathan and I used to do a father-son trip every June, just the 2 of us, before life got in the way of that kind of thing. That year we picked the Pisgah National Forest, a stretch I'd hiked twice before, quiet, unremarkable, the kind of place where the worst thing you expect to meet is a raccoon in your food bag. We hiked in about 5 miles, further than usual, and set up near a shallow creek bend where the water made just enough noise to lull you to sleep. Nathan was at that perfect age, old enough to carry his own pack, young enough that everything still felt like magic instead of a chore. We built a fire, cooked, told bad jokes, watched the stars come out one at a time until the whole sky was lit up. He was out by 9:30. I sat up another hour, then crawled into my bag beside him and slept harder than I had in months. At around 1 a.m., Nathan's hand closed around my wrist. I want you to understand something about being woken up by your own child in the dark. There is no grogginess, there is no slow surfacing. 1 second you are unconscious, and the next you are fully, completely awake, because some ancient part of your brain understands that a child waking a parent at night means something is wrong. He wasn't crying, he wasn't even trembling, not yet. He just said, in a flat, careful whisper, "Dad, something's outside. It's looking right at us." Our tent had a mesh liner and a rainfly that I'd left unzipped about 8 inches at the peak for airflow. Enough moonlight leaked through that gap to throw a pale wash across the inside of the tent, and through the mesh, I could make out the tree line and the open ground just past our fire pit. There was something crouched there, not near the trees. Out in the open, maybe 10 feet from the tent wall, low to the ground, in a posture I have spent 9 years trying and failing to compare to anything natural. It wasn't a bear. I've had bears close to camp before. The weight distribution is different. The head carriage is different. They don't fold down like that. It wasn't a deer, wasn't a coyote, wasn't anything with 4 legs at all. It was crouched the way a person crouches when they're trying to make themselves small. And it was facing us, and it was not moving, not swaying, not breathing that I could see, not shifting its weight, just watching. I put my palm flat on Nathan's chest, stay down, stay still, and reach slow for the flashlight beside my pillow. My hand was shaking so badly it took 2 tries to find the switch. I want to be precise here because this is the part that still keeps me up. The light came on, and there was nothing there. Not it ran, not it ducked into the trees. I swept that beam across every inch of open ground, the fire pit, the tree line, the creek bank. Nothing moving, nothing at any edge of the light. Whatever had been 8 feet from my son's face 1/2 second earlier was simply, completely gone, as though the space it occupied had just been switched off. I told Nathan it was a shadow, a trick of the moon through the trees. He looked at me. I remember this look exactly. The way a smart kid looks at an adult when he's decided to let the adult have the lie, for both their sakes. He didn't sleep again that night. Neither did I. I sat up with that flashlight in my hand until the sky went gray, and I did not take my eyes off that patch of ground once. At first light, Nathan asked if we could hike out early. He didn't explain, didn't need to. I said, "Sure, bud, let's get some breakfast in you and pack up." Before I broke down the tent, I made myself walk the ground where the thing had crouched. And there was something there. Not clean footprints. The pine duff was too soft and dry for that. But depressions. Pressed down patches in a rough cluster, low to the ground, consistent with something crouched on 2 points near the front and 2 points further back. And behind that cluster, a single long drag mark through the leaf litter, maybe 5 feet, like something had launched itself backward fast in one motion. I photographed it on my phone. I still have those photos. They show something. They don't prove anything. That's the frustrating shape of this whole experience, that everything sits exactly at the edge of being evidence without ever crossing over into it. Nathan and I have only talked about that night 3 times in 9 years. Once when he was 16, once at his college graduation of all places, standing outside the reception, and once 6 months ago. Each time, his account matches mine down to the smallest detail. Except for one thing he adds that I never had. He tells me he was awake and watching it for almost 2 full minutes before he woke me. He says he could track its exact outline because it blocked out a patch of moonlight cleaner than anything natural should. Like something more solid than solid. He says it never once looked away from the tent the entire time. And he says the only reason he didn't scream, the only reason he waited, was that some instinct in him, at 12 years old, told him that if he stayed perfectly still, it might eventually decide to leave. He was right, it did leave. I've never been able to stop wondering what would have happened if it hadn't. We haven't been back to that stretch of the Pisgah since. I don't think we ever will. But every June, without fail, Nathan calls me the week of the trip we used to take. Not to talk about it, never directly, just to ask if I'm doing anything for the anniversary. I always tell him no. We both know that's not entirely true. Story 6. I have a recording of 2 people walking toward each other in an empty forest before sunrise. I know they were people because I heard them breathe. I know they weren't people because 11 minutes later they were gone, and there was nowhere for them to go. My name is Desmond Farrow. I'm 43. 11 years ago, I made my living recording sound for wildlife documentaries. Dawn choruses, water systems, wind through canopy, the raw ambient textures editors layer under narration. I had close to $15,000 in field equipment strapped to my back and a week booked alone in the Bitterroot backcountry in Montana, chasing a specific kind of silence you only get above 4,000 feet. The first 2 days went exactly the way I'd planned them. Stable weather, clean signal, that strange meditative calm that settles in when your whole job is to stop talking and just listen. On the morning of the 3rd day, about 90 minutes before sunrise, I set up in a narrow clearing ringed by lodgepole pine. Full rig running, headphones on, levels clean. I'd been capturing the early chorus for almost 35 minutes, layer after layer, more species joining as the light shifted. Then it stopped. Not a fade, not one bird trailing off after another. Every voice in that clearing, and there were easily 24, maybe more, cut out in the same instant like someone had pulled a plug. I didn't move. I kept the headphones on and kept monitoring. Wind, distant runoff, my own breathing slightly too loud in my own ears, and then with the kind of clarity that $2,000 microphones exist to deliver. Footsteps. From the tree line to my left. 1 step. A pause. I'd guess 3, maybe 4 seconds. Another step. Another pause. Unhurried. Almost patient. The way you'd walk if you had somewhere to be but no reason to rush getting there. I turned my head toward the sound. I couldn't see that side of the clearing. The light was still flat and gray, the pines too dense. I pulled one ear cup back and listened without the headphones. Same thing. Step, pause, step. Exactly what the recording was already catching. Then a second set of footsteps started. Tree line to my right, heavier. A slightly different rhythm but moving on the same line. Straight across the clearing, straight toward the first set, straight toward the point where they'd meet somewhere just past me, off to my right. I was sitting almost exactly between them. I've listened to this section of tape more times than I'd like to admit. Both sets of footsteps cross the open ground from opposite tree lines. They never speed up, they never falter. And at the moment they would have intersected, the exact moment 2 people walking toward each other from either side of a clearing would have to either meet or collide. Both sets stop. Same instant. No words, no contact sound, no animal call, nothing. Then silence for what my timestamp says was 22 minutes. At minute 22, the birds came back. Not gradually. All at once, the same way they'd vanished. I sent the file to a colleague of mine, a sound editor who spent 2 decades working location audio for feature films, someone with no reason to indulge me. He told me flatly that the cadence and weight distribution in both sets of footsteps were unmistakably human. 2 people walking normally on dry pine litter. He asked the obvious question, did I go look? I told him no. He didn't push it. I think he understood something about that clearing that I only understood after the fact. That some silences are asking you not to check. I've done solo location work in wilderness maybe 25 times since that morning. My gear's better now. My discipline is better. I can sit inside a 4-hour session without my attention drifting the way it used to. But I changed one thing, and I've never changed it back. I don't record with my eyes closed anymore. It costs me. Eyes closed monitoring is how you catch the subtleties. A wing beat under wind, a shift in water flow 300 yards off. I know I'm a worse recordist for it. I made the trade anyway, because there have been mornings since, not many but enough, where I hear something moving at the edge of a clearing that I can't account for, and I need my eyes open when it happens. I need to be looking at the tree line, not trusting my ears to tell me what's crossing it. I don't listen back to that Bitterroot recording much anymore either, not because the curiosity's gone, because somewhere along the way, going back into that file stopped feeling like searching for an answer and started feeling like something closer to an invitation, like I was leaving a door open on purpose. There's one more thing, the 22 minutes. I've checked the timestamp obsessively, more than I'd admit to most people. Entry point of silence, exit point of silence, 22 minutes every single time I run the math. Except 6 weeks ago, working through the archive to back it up on a new drive, I checked it again, out of habit more than anything. 23. I reran it 4 times. Frame-accurate timestamp, same file, same waveform I've stared at for a decade. 23 minutes and 4 seconds. I haven't opened that file since. Story 7. I want to get one thing straight before I tell you this. I am not a storyteller. I have told this once, in full, in 11 years, and that was because my husband walked out onto our porch at 4 in the morning and found me sitting there with a dead flashlight in my hand, and he asked me what was wrong, and I finally just let it out. My name is Walt Brennan. I'm 54. I run a small hardware store outside Asheville. I'm not a survivalist, not a through hiker, nothing like that. I go out maybe 6 times a year, always with company, always on marked trail. What I am, mostly, is the guy people call when they need someone steady. And that's why, when my friend Sam Kowalczyk was going through a brutal custody fight that spring, and he said he needed 4 days in the mountains with somebody who wouldn't ask too many questions, I packed my bag and told him I was in. We picked the Artlobe Trail, late August, the kind of heat that sits on your chest before you've even started climbing. Sam talked the whole first 2 days. Really talked, the way you do when you've been holding something in for a year and it finally has somewhere to go. I mostly listened. That was the job. By day 3, he'd gone quiet, and I let him have that. Everybody needs the quiet day. We'd been walking maybe 90 minutes without a word between us when the trail bent hard to the left around a rock face, and there, sitting dead center on the path, was a kid. A boy, 9, maybe 10. Windbreaker, the cheap kind you get at a big box store before soccer season, and jeans that were too warm for the weather. No pack, no water, no wrapper, no juice box, nothing. 4.5 miles from the nearest trailhead, and this kid had nothing on him at all. He was sitting with his hands stacked in his lap, staring back down the trail the way we'd just come from. He didn't turn when we walked up. Sam said, "Hey buddy," from about 15 feet out. That's when the kid looked at us, and I want to describe the face carefully because I've spent a long time trying to, and I still don't have it exactly right. It wasn't scared, it wasn't relieved, it wasn't blank in the way a shy kid goes blank. It was like somebody had taken a normal face and quietly removed every single thing that usually moves on it. I got down on one knee, asked him where his mom and dad were. He said he didn't know, asked how he got out here. He said he walked, asked from which direction, and he pointed back the way we'd come. Back down 3 hours of trail that we had walked without seeing one other soul, one side path, one trailhead, nothing. There was no spot on that stretch where a child could have stepped onto the trail without us seeing him do it. None. Sam knelt down next to me and asked his name. The kid said Toby. Sam asked for a last name, and the kid just looked at him and said he didn't want to give it. Not that he forgot, he didn't want to. We stayed with him almost half an hour. I kept my voice light, kept asking easy questions, and he answered most of them, calm, unhurried, in this flat, even tone that didn't match a kid who'd supposedly been alone on a mountain for 2 days, which is what he told us next. 2 days by himself. No sunburn, no cracked lips, nothing you'd expect from a kid who'd been out in that heat that long. I held out my water bottle. He shook his head, just once, side to side, like the offer didn't apply to him. Sam offered a protein bar, same head shake, same motion, almost identical to the first. I told him we'd get him down to a road and find his family. He said okay, stood up and walked out in front of us, set the pace himself. That part didn't hit me as strange until later, sitting with it. A lost kid doesn't lead, a lost kid follows. This kid walked ahead like he already knew exactly where the trail went, like he was the one taking us somewhere, not the other way around. About a mile in, Sam stopped to check his phone for a signal, and the boy stopped too, turned around and said in that same flat voice, "It'd probably be better if you went back." Not we should turn around. Better if you went back. Like he was doing us a courtesy. Sam gave a short laugh, the nervous kind, and said we were getting him to a road whether he liked it or not. The kid just turned and kept walking. He led us to a service cut I didn't know existed. Not on any map I'd ever looked at, a rutted dirt track branching off through the trees. And parked at the end of it was a faded green pickup, older model, mud-caked, and I want to say there was no plate on it, but honestly I couldn't get myself to look that closely. There was a man sitting on the tailgate, late 50s maybe, forearms like he'd worked outside his whole life, sunburned red-brown. He didn't stand up when the boy came into the clearing, didn't ask if he was okay, he just said flat, almost bored, "There you are." Like the kid was a dog that had wandered off. The boy walked straight to him and climbed up onto the tailgate without a glance back at us. Sam started to ask the man if he was the father, and I grabbed his sleeve before he got past the first two words. The man looked at us, a long, still, appraising look, maybe 4 or 5 seconds, and then said, "You two can head on now." Not thanks, not a wave. "You two can head on now," said in a way that made it clear it wasn't really an offer. I got Sam moving. Didn't let go of his arm until the truck was out of sight behind the trees, and honestly not for another quarter mile after that. We didn't talk for almost 2 miles. Then Sam finally said, "What was that?" And I said, "I don't know," and neither of us has ever really improved on that answer since. I called it in once we got to cell signal near the trailhead, gave a full description, the boy, the man, the truck, the location of that side road as close as I could pin it. Nobody ever called me back. No follow-up, no update, nothing. I checked missing children's registries for months afterward on my own time, quietly, at night, without telling Sam. I never found a match for a boy named Toby or Caleb or anything close matching that description in that county in that year. I think about the face most. Not the words, not the truck, not even the man on the tailgate. The face. How completely it had nothing on it. I think about whether Toby was ever his real name at all, or whether it was something handed to him to say to people exactly like us, on a day exactly like that one. Some nights, I still wonder if he's out there right now, sitting on some other flat rock, somewhere down some other trail, waiting for the next 2 people dumb enough, or kind enough, to stop. Story 8. My name is Marcus Deland, and before I tell you what happened on Blackfern Ridge, I need you to understand something. I don't scare easily. I've spent 11 years as a licensed land surveyor in the mountains of West Virginia and southern Ohio, walking property lines through forests so old and untouched that GPS units lose confidence in themselves. I've slept alone in places where the nearest road is a 4-hour walk away. I know what wilderness sounds like when it's just being wilderness. This is not that story. 2.5 years ago, I took a contract job surveying a disputed 40-acre parcel bordering Monongahela National Forest. The land had been fought over by 2 branches of the same family for a decade, and nobody had walked the boundary properly since 1961. My task was simple: find the old monuments, confirm the historical line, and get out. The first day went exactly as expected. Brutal terrain, thick laurel thickets, but I recovered 3 of the 4 corner markers by early afternoon. Better luck than the records suggested I'd have. I made camp near a creek at the base of a rock outcrop and slept without incident. The second day is when things changed. I was working the western boundary, moving slow through a stand of old hemlock when I found them. I want to describe this precisely because I know how easily these details get exaggerated in the retelling, and I'd rather you hear it exactly as I experienced it. They were small mounds, maybe 2.5 feet tall, constructed from bent saplings woven into a dome shape around a base of flat creek stones. Not a natural pile, not something an animal makes. Someone, or something, with real dexterity and real patience had built these. There were 6 of them, spaced roughly 50 feet apart, running in a nearly straight line that cut across the property boundary at almost exactly 90 degrees. I photographed each one, logged the coordinates like I would any other field observation, and kept working. That's the job. You don't stop a survey because you found something strange. You note it, and you move forward. That night, I woke up at 2:14 a.m. I didn't wake to a sound. I woke to the absence of one. It took me almost a minute lying there in the dark to understand what my brain had already registered. The forest had a rhythm to it, and the rhythm was wrong. The normal night noise, insects, small rustling, the creek, would run for a stretch and then cut to total silence for 2 or 3 seconds, then resume. I checked my watch and started timing it out of some instinct I still can't fully explain. 42 seconds of sound, silence, 39 seconds, silence, 46 seconds, silence. Not a machine. Machines don't drift. This had variance in it, small, human, almost like breathing. And that variance was worse than perfect regularity would have been. A machine you can dismiss. This felt like something pacing itself. I lay there and counted for nearly 3 hours. Nothing approached the tent. I heard no footsteps, no breathing, nothing that would let me point to a source. Just that rhythm, holding steady until it simply stopped, sometime around 5 a.m., and the forest went back to sounding like a forest. I told myself it was some kind of localized weather phenomenon, a pressure thing, wind pooling strangely against the ridge. I've used variations of that explanation for a lot of things I've heard in the field over the years. It's a comforting lie, and comforting lies have their uses. In the morning, I broke camp and walked the last stretch toward my equipment cache, which I'd left beside a split oak I'd used as a reference point the day before. I remember looking at the base of that tree specifically when I set up because a reference tree needs to be unmistakable in the log. There was a 7th mound at the base of that oak. It had not been there the previous evening. I would stake my license on that. And it hadn't been built somewhere convenient, somewhere I might have simply missed it. It was constructed against the exact tree I had used as my personal marker, less than 15 feet from where I had been sleeping while that rhythm counted itself out in the dark. I stood there for a long time before I made myself walk closer. Woven into the lattice at the peak of the mound, tucked where the branches crossed, was a strip of fabric. Faded red, maybe 3 inches long, torn rather than cut, knotted once around the branches like it had been tied there deliberately rather than dropped. I didn't touch it. I photographed it from 4 angles, the way I document any piece of physical evidence I didn't fully trust myself around. Then I packed my equipment, finished logging the last 2 monuments on the far side of the ridge, because the job wasn't done, and some part of me needed to prove to myself that I could still finish it. And I drove the 2.5 hours home in the dark without stopping once. I never told the client, I never told my crew. I filed the survey, closed the job, and moved on to the next contract the way you do. I've worked plenty of isolated sites since then. Old cemeteries nobody visits, ridgelines nobody's cut a trail through in 50 years. I've heard things I couldn't identify, and I've made my peace with most of them, filed them under the general unexplainable weirdness that comes with spending your career in places most people never go. But I have never gone back to that ridge. The family dispute settled out of court 18 months ago, and there was no professional reason to return, so I haven't. What stays with me isn't the mounds themselves. It's the fabric, a strip of cloth knotted with intention, placed by hands that understood exactly where I'd slept and exactly how close they'd let themselves get. Whatever built those markers wasn't finished with its work when I stumbled into it. And whatever decided to build the 7th one, right against my reference tree, also decided to leave something behind. Something meant, specifically for me to find. I try not to think too hard about what that means. But some nights, in my own house, the ambient sound outside will drop out, just for a second or two. And in that silence I find myself doing something I wish I could stop. Story 9. Before I tell you this, you need one piece of information first. I didn't have it when the night started. I only got it 3 days later, standing at a ranger counter in a building that smelled like wood smoke and printer ink, and it changed how I understand everything that happened to me before that moment. I wasn't the first person to call this in. I was the 4th. The ranger who took my report was maybe 60, gray braid, reading glasses pushed up on her forehead. She wrote down what I said without much reaction until I gave her the coordinates. Then she stopped writing. She looked at me for a second too long and said quietly, like she was deciding in real time whether it was her place to tell me, "That's the 4th report from that ridge this month." She wouldn't say what the other 3 described, just that the details overlapped. "I want you to sit with that number the way I had to. My name's Daniel Voss. I'm 31. Back when this happened, I was 28, working freelance for an outdoor gear company, shooting product photography on location. The kind of job where they fly you out to some remote trail system and pay you to make a tent look heroic against a sunrise. I was 3 days into a 6-day assignment in a stretch of the Bitterroot Range in Montana, way off the marked trail system, chasing a specific light condition that only shows up for about 40 minutes at high elevation right after a cold front moves through. I'd been out there alone for 2 days when I found the camp. I wasn't even looking for it. I'd left the trail to scout a granite outcrop for a shot, cutting through a stand of lodgepole pine, and the ground dipped into a shallow bowl in the terrain, a natural hollow, maybe 60 feet across, completely invisible unless you were standing right at its edge. And sitting in the middle of it was a fully set-up camp, not abandoned looking, active. A single large dome tent, staked down tight, guy lines taut like someone had checked them recently. A camp stove sitting on a folded tarp with a pot still on the burner. A pair of trekking poles leaned against a tree in a perfect X. And laid out on a flat rock, drying in a neat row, were 3 energy bar wrappers, folded, not crumpled, folded, like someone had been killing time. I called out, waited a good 5 minutes, walked the full perimeter of the hollow. Nothing. No trail markers, no vehicle sounds, nothing. I unzipped the tent just enough to look in, and here's the part that still catches in my throat when I describe it. There were 3 sleeping bags inside, all 3 zipped shut and puffed up like they'd never been slept in, arranged in a fan pattern around a single battery lantern that was switched off. 3 pairs of boots were lined up just inside the tent flap, laces tucked in, toes pointing out. The kind of habit you only build after years of doing something the same way every single time. No phones, no wallets, no sign of packs. The stove's pot had water in it, cold but not evaporated much, which told me it hadn't been sitting long, maybe 6-8 hours. I did the responsible thing. I left a card with my name and satellite messenger number wedged under a rock by the stove, and I photographed the whole site, thinking maybe I'd need it if I had to file a welfare report. Then I moved on because I had a shot window closing, and honestly because staying in that hollow made the hair on my arms stand up in a way I couldn't explain with logic. That night I made camp on an exposed ridge about 2 miles northeast, elevation just under 9,000 feet, clear sightline down into a different drainage basin. I was up late reviewing frames on my camera when I noticed a light moving in the valley floor below me, a single point, warm-colored like a headlamp on a low setting. It wasn't hiking. Hikers move in a line. This moved in loops. Forward 20 yards, stop, backtrack, cut sideways, stop again. A search pattern, if I had to name it. I watched it for almost an hour before it just stopped. Didn't fade out gradually the way a headlamp does when someone switches it off. It was there, and then the space where it had been was dark, like something had stepped between me and it. I didn't sleep well after that. The next morning, against my better judgment, I went back down to the hollow. Everything was exactly as I'd left it. Same tent, same taut lines, same 3 folded wrappers on the rock. My card was still wedged under the stone, untouched. But the trekking poles that had been leaned in an X against the tree were gone. Not knocked over, not fallen. Gone. And in their place, propped in almost the exact same spot, was a single boot. Not one of the 3 pairs from inside the tent. A 4th boot, a different size, caked in mud that looked dry like it had traveled a long way to get there. I did not go near the tent again. I packed my gear, and I did not stop moving until I hit the trailhead parking lot 11 hours later, arriving well after dark, alone, with my satellite messenger gripped in my hand the entire way. I filed the report at the ranger station the following morning. That's when I learned about the other 3 calls. All from hikers, all in the same 3-week window, all describing something in that same general drainage. She wouldn't give me specifics. Wouldn't confirm whether any of those reports mentioned a 4th boot or a light in the valley or anything at all. Just that mine made 4. I still have the photographs. I've never posted them, partly because if those 3 people are still out there somewhere alive, the last thing they need is strangers picking apart images of their belongings for entertainment. And partly because I keep coming back to that boot. It wasn't there when I first found the camp. It was there when I came back. Which means somewhere in that 18-hour window, while I was 2 miles away watching a light search a valley floor in patterns no lost hiker would ever walk, something else was in that hollow with those tents, and it left something behind on purpose. Story 10. My name is Dale Merrow. I'm 41. For 19 years I've worked as a structural ironworker on high steel. The guys who walk beams 600 feet up with nothing but a harness and a habit of not looking down wrong. You don't survive that job by imagining things. You survive it by reading exactly what's in front of you, every single time, because the one time you don't get a second chance to learn from it. I say this because people hear ironworker and picture someone who doesn't spook. That's accurate. I don't spook. That's what makes the next part hard to explain away. Last October, I did a solo 6-day hike through a stretch of backcountry in the Adirondacks. A loop I'd done twice before, remote enough that you might see 2 other parties in a week. I tell people this story now and then, carefully, because I know exactly how it sounds. This is not that kind of story where I'm trying to convince you of a monster. I'm just telling you what happened, in order, the way I'd file an incident report. Day 1 was uneventful. Day 2, in the early afternoon, I noticed something behind me on the trail, not visually, audibly. A footstep pattern, evenly spaced, matching a hiking pace, maybe 80 yards back through the trees. I've spent 2 decades on job sites learning to isolate specific sounds inside chaotic noise. Wind, machinery, 40 guys talking over each other. Because missing the wrong sound gets somebody killed. This wasn't wind-moving brush. It was a heel strike. Then a roll to the ball of the foot, a boot. I stopped. It stopped. Not a beat later, not staggered, but essentially the same instant I did. I started again. Roughly 15 seconds passed before it resumed. I tested this 4 separate times over the next mile, varying my pace deliberately to see if the pattern would break. It didn't. Whatever was back there was tracking my rhythm, not just walking in the same direction I happened to be walking. I left the trail once, sat behind a blowdown for about 10 minutes, and watched the path both directions. Nothing came through. No one passed. When I got back on trail and continued, the footsteps didn't return for almost 40 minutes, as if whatever it was had decided to let the gap widen on its own terms, not mine. Over days 2 and 3 it kept doing this, sometimes trailing behind. Once, unmistakably, ahead of me. I heard the same tread coming from around a switchback before I reached it, like something was looping around to walk toward me instead of behind me. When I came around the bend, nothing. The sound cut out at the exact point where I'd have had a sight line. Night 5 is the one I actually think about. I'd hung my food properly, checked my tent stakes, done everything the way I always do. That part of the routine never changes regardless of what else is going on. I woke sometime before dawn, and it took me a minute lying there to understand what felt wrong. My pack was sitting exactly where I'd left it, just outside the tent vestibule, but the 2 carabiners I used to clip my water bottles to the outside webbing had been unclipped, removed, and reclipped together, looped through each other, linked like a chain, then refastened to the same loop of webbing they'd started on. It wasn't random. It was assembled. Whoever did it had unclipped 2 separate pieces of gear, connected them to each other with intention, and put them back in a way that took real time and real care, all without waking me, without moving anything else, without taking anything. I sat with my back against a boulder for probably 20 minutes just looking at those 2 carabiners linked together in the dark, working out what it meant. Because that's the training kicking in. You don't ask, was that scary? You ask, what were the actors' available options, and which one did they choose? Whoever or whatever had been out there had complete access to my camp while I was unconscious. They could have taken anything, damaged anything, been anywhere near me they wanted to be. Instead, they picked the smallest, strangest, most deliberate possible action and executed it with precision, then left everything else untouched. That's not an animal. Animals don't reclip gear. That's not a person with bad intentions either. A person who wanted to rob me or hurt me had a sleeping, unarmed target for hours and did neither. What I was looking at was a message. I still don't have a translation for it. I just know it was chosen on purpose out of every other thing that could have happened that night. On the last evening before I lost the light, I stood facing the tree line and said it out loud, plainly, at a normal volume, the way you'd state a policy to somebody on a job site. I know you've been out here the whole trip. I know about the carabiners. I'm telling you now, if I hear you inside my camp again tonight, I'm not going to wait around to find out why. Then I went into the tent and zipped it shut. There was a stretch of total silence after that, long enough that I started to think maybe I'd only spoken to trees. And then, footsteps, moving away this time, unhurried, getting fainter with distance until there was nothing left to hear at all. I hiked out the next morning without incident and drove 5 hours home saying almost nothing the whole way. My girlfriend tells people I came back different. She's not wrong. I check the deadbolt on our door twice now before I go to sleep, every night, not because I think about it, because my hands just do it now the same way they check a harness buckle without me deciding to. I sit facing doorways in restaurants. I keep every piece of gear inside my tent when I camp now. Nothing left outside overnight, not a single carabiner, not a stove, nothing. People ask why. I tell them it's just a habit I picked up. That's true, it's just not the whole answer. Because some nights, out at the edge of wherever I'm camping, I still think I hear something pacing itself to match my breathing, patient, unhurried, in no rush at all to be seen. And I still haven't decided whether that's a memory, or whether it just hasn't found the trail yet. Story 11. My name is Daniel Ashworth. I'm 34. I install industrial HVAC systems outside Bozeman, Montana, and until 11 months ago, the longest I'd ever spent outside was a weekend at a lake with a cooler full of beer and zero ambition. Then my brother died, and I did the thing people do when they don't know how to sit still with grief. I bought $400 of gear and told everyone I was going to hike the Bob Marshall Wilderness solo. 7 days. No cell signal for most of it. My sister-in-law thought I was insane. She was probably right. The first 2 days were exactly what I wanted, legs burning in a good way. Sleeping like the dead. Bad choice of words, but true. I felt closer to my brother out there than I had at the funeral. Day 3 is when everything changed. I was descending toward a river crossing near what my map called Mile Marker 9, a rough wooden post someone had driven into the ground decades ago to mark distance. Wedged into a crack at the base of that post was a piece of paper, folded twice, weighted down with a rock so the wind wouldn't take it. It wasn't hidden. It also wasn't obvious. You had to be walking slowly, looking down to catch the edge of it sticking out from under the stone. My name was written on the outside, not hiker, not whoever finds this. Daniel. Block letters, pressed hard enough into the paper that I could feel the indentation with my thumb. I stood there for a long time before I touched it. Here's what I told myself, standing on that trail. Daniel is not a rare name. Somebody else named Daniel had come through here, somebody else had left a note for them, and I was about to read a message that had nothing to do with me. That was the story I needed to be true. I believed it for about 4 seconds, right up until I remembered that I hadn't seen another human being since sunrise on day 1. I'd signed the trailhead register under my real name. Nobody else had. I opened it, one line in small, careful handwriting, like whoever wrote it had taken their time. Don't cross the river tomorrow morning, go around. No name, no explanation, nothing else on the page. I sat down right there on the trail and made myself breathe before I let myself think. Because panicking 40 miles from a road with no phone signal is how people actually die out there. Not from bears, from bad decisions made in the first 10 minutes of fear. So I forced myself into problem-solving mode, the same mode I use when a system's failing, and I don't know why yet. I listed what I knew instead of what I felt. 1. Someone knew my full first name, which meant they'd either seen the trailhead register or heard it from someone who had. 2. Someone knew my itinerary well enough to predict correctly that I'd be at that river crossing the following morning, which meant they either had a copy of my permit or they'd been watching me hike for 2 straight days without me ever spotting them. 3. That note had been placed before I got there, which meant somebody was ahead of me on a trail I hadn't told a single living soul I was taking, aside from my sister-in-law, who thought hiking was a personal betrayal and would sooner set the car on fire than come find me. I had 3 choices, same as anyone would. Turn back the way I came, losing 2 days and 40 miles of progress. Ignore the note completely and cross the river anyway, chalking the whole thing up to some backcountry prankster with too much time and a weird sense of humor. Or find a way around. I went around. It cost me 6 extra miles and most of a day, cutting through brush that wasn't on any trail map, using a compass I barely knew how to read. I came out the other side of that valley 2 ridgelines over from where the crossing would have put me, and I never once saw that river up close. I filed a report with the ranger station when I got back to cell signal. The ranger was kind and clearly humoring me. Nobody had